myself. I'm facing it with my God. And can I tell you that faith pushes you up every morning, and it's something on the inside that says you got to just keep on keeping on. I wish I had some help in here this morning that can say the faith, I didn't even feel like coming to church, but faith told me I ought to get myself up because I'm not the only one that had to take a licking but keep on ticking. Along this journey to Psalms 31. So when you found Psalms 31, say so by the sound of all aboard. Need more time, hold the ship. Psalms 31, beginning at verse number 1. We will read verses 1 through 5 into your hearing. And then we'll skip down to verses 15 through 16 from the English Standard Version. It reads this wise. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Rescue me speedily. Be a rock of refuge for me, a strong fortress to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you led me and guide me. You take me out of the net they have hidden for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. Verse 15. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine on your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. For the time we have gathered together, I want to talk in today's installment from this thought: keep trusting. Keep trusting. Keep trusting. David C. Igner is a regular contributor and writer for the notable and widely used Daily Bread devotional. He writes that many people, church, are afraid of flying. For them, the very thought of being airborne fills them with fear and anxiety. For that reason, the American Phobic Society recommends the following techniques for coping with the fear of flying. Lean in, church. It says you ought to avoid sugar and caffeine before and during your flight. It says you ought to lean back at takeoff and let your muscles go limp. It says that you ought to rate your anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. It says you ought to think positive thoughts and notice how much your fear will begin to decrease. It says you ought to breathe deeply. It says you ought to close your eyes and stretch your arms. The final recommendation is that maybe you ought to wear a rubber band on your wrist and snap it every time you get fearful thoughts. These are the suggestions that they say help people get over their fear of flying. But Igner further submits, he says he wants to add to the list, and he says this particular suggestion works with all kinds of fear, and he says you ought to put your trust in God. I think that's a word for us today, Greater Thankful, because we have plenty in the world that can make us upset or upset our spirit and wreck our emotions and produce fear in our everyday lives. The constant news of mass shootings or what we saw happen to a former president on yesterday, looking at a world that's more divided in my estimation than ever before, living in a time where inflation and interest rates continue to rise. The unexpected nature of life at times, Greater Thankful, produces fear and anxiety. And there ought to be somebody who can testify today that life will sometimes throw you unexpected jabs or haymakers that'll make you want to quit. Is there anybody here this morning that can be real? That you had to deal with some blows in your life and you said to yourself, I would rather quit than have to face this situation. I'd rather stay in bed than have to confront this issue. But I've come to tell you this morning, Greater Thankful, that in the midst of all the uncertainty and the occasional unfairness in this world, it's easy for you and I to embrace positive or negative coping mechanisms. But may I suggest to you this morning that the appropriate and best response to continuous change and unsolicited challenges and the unexpected twists and turns of life is to repeatedly and unashamedly put your trust in God. Come here this morning, because in life, people will put you in a position where you have to assess and hopefully maintain your confidence and trust in your God. All I'm trying to tell you this morning is you can't change everything that happened to you. You can't derail every attack. You cannot change the course of history. But one thing you can do, it says, you may say, God, I don't like what I'm going through. I may not appreciate it. I may not understand. But God, even though I don't like it, even though I don't understand, I'm going to keep my trust in you. We used to sing the old song growing up in the church, I will trust in the Lord until I die. Can I put a quarter in the meter and park right here? Church, you have to learn to make the declaration not to trust yourself and not to trust your own understanding and not to trust your own ability. But when life doesn't make sense, you have to have the confidence to say, I don't know what's going on around me. I don't know someone who's sitting, but I do know someone in the midst of what's going on that I don't understand, who sits high and looks down low. I know somebody who's always superintending the actions of the world. I got a God who's always leaving from where he is and coming from where he's from. And I know I have a God that's in control of everything that happens. This is the case. This is the case this morning for where our sermonic spotlight shines this morning. We look at this psalm. The composer of the song, this composer of this Hebrew sheet music. There is a lot of debate about the identity of the author or composer and what were the circumstances, the reason they penned such words. But come a little closer this morning, church. It is believed in one thought that this psalm is written by Jeremiah the prophet or prophets like Jeremiah. Others suggest that this psalm should be accredited to David, Deacon Stephanie, because of the language or the phrase that is in the psalm that says, I said in my haste. It has kind of a Davidic ring to it. And we don't know exactly who the author or composer of this psalm is. But however, we feel the heart of the writer. Church, is it always necessary to know the name of who wrote something when you can connect with their heart? When you ride down the street for my music lovers, do you know every artist that you listen to? Sometimes you may not know the artist, but you just feel the lyrics. Church, this morning, we feel the words of the psalmist. This is a psalm, Deacon Bethay, of lament. It's a crying out because of physical malady or spiritual burnout. We don't know if the writer is on the run or if the composer is being run down because of false accusations. Either way, if you have physical malady this morning, your physical malady can lead to spiritual burnout. And your spiritual burnout can lead to physical malady. The psalm reminds us, child of God, that affliction and assurance can live in the same house. Don't you miss that right there. Because sometimes as Christians, we don't think that affliction and assurance can live in the same house. Lean in, because that's where our faith begins to grow. We trust God, but it doesn't mean that life won't never hurt. We have confidence in God, but it does not mean that chaos is not always around. We have assurance that God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, but it does not mean that there won't be moments where anxiety handcuffs us. The good news is the pain and chaotic circumstances should not suspend our hope in God. Okay, hope is the fuel. Hope is motivation. Hope helps us find a way when it seems like there is no way. But can I tell you, church, hope is often born during turbulent times of trouble. Sometimes you don't know how much you have until life gets rough. The lyric of the Psalms offers us a lesson that when life gives us what we rather not have, what we rather not seem to have to deal with, we should recommit ourselves to trusting God. I know that's not deep, but that's a word for somebody. Because life will give you what you rather not have. And there are times that life will seemingly give you what you rather not want to handle. And that's a good time for you and I to put all of our trust in God. So what do you do, Pastor? I hear you asking, what do you do, Pastor, to keep trusting God? I'm glad you asked. Here it is, number one. I always have pen and paper. Here it is, number one. You need to have an earnest attachment. You need to have an earnest attachment. Listen to the text. Lord, don't close your Bible. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Y'all see that? The psalmist is crying out. The writer seems to be in a bind or in a tight situation. Life has a way, church, of transporting us into spaces that cause us to cry, but not only cause us to cry, but it calls us to cry out for help. The cry of the psalmist is not a cry of hopelessness, but he cries out to God. This introductory plea is clear. The psalmist says, I'm putting my trust in God. Come here this morning. One of the reoccurring missteps that you and I make when life gets tough, if we have a tendency to start looking for alternatives to our adversity. And I'm here to tell you this morning that when life strikes, there's no time for you to start second-guessing yourself or start second-guessing God. When life strikes, that's not the time to start looking for a new religion. When life strikes, that's not the time to return to old, no-good coping mechanism. When life strikes, that doesn't mean that you start hanging out with people who mean you no good. Every day, child of God is faced with overwhelming forces and endeavors to pull you down. You got to make a declaration that I'm putting my confidence in God. Look at the psalmist, church. Tears are streaming down his eyes, but he possesses an unwavering confidence. I believe that the opening line of this text is a picture for everyday faith. Let the church say everyday faith. May I suggest to you, church, it's one thing to quote scripture. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not seen. All things are possible. It's real cute to give a definition of faith, but when you pull out your little devotional book, pull out your little highlighter, and you can tell people what faith is, but it's another thing. It's one thing to be able to quote about it, but everyday faith says, I got real tears, but I got to put practicality into it as well. My tears are evidence of my inward emotions. Somebody said, Reverend, I got trouble on every hand. I got problems. My problems got problems. My issues got issues. My situations got situations. I hear you this morning. But I come to tell you that there's some things that may grieve your heart, and troubles are so complex, and it seems like it's so many. If it's not careful, your troubles will make you sometimes want to jump off the ledge and say, Lord, just end it now. But is there anybody that can testify this morning that sometimes you have some stuff that is still bringing trauma in your life? I mean, when the dates come around, you start getting sick and down and depressed. You see, you have turbulence all around me and within, and you got to understand that you got to be able to put your confidence in God. But everyday faith acknowledges that you have issues, but you still make a bold claim that I may have issues, I may have trouble, I may have trauma, I may have turbulence, but I still have confidence in God. Listen, everyday faith says, I can't erase what's happening to me, but I'm empowered to face what unsettles me. Can I tell you something? Faith ain't wishing your problems away. Faith ain't acting like you don't have any problems. But faith puts in something inside of you that says, yes, I have problems. Yes, I have trials. Yes, I have situations, but I'm determined to face these problems. But I'm not facing it by myself. I'm facing it with my God. And can I tell you that faith pushes you up every morning, and it's something on the inside that says you got to just keep on keeping on. I wish I had some help in here this morning that can say the faith, I didn't even feel like coming to church, but faith told me I ought to get myself up because I'm not the only one that had to take a licking but keep on ticking. My faith teaches me that I'm not going to go on through life without God. I'm not going to have another relationship without God. I'm not going to go through another life transition without God. I can't raise my children without God. I can't face another season of anxiety without God. Faith says, yes, God may not move it, but faith says, I got a God that's moving in me. Tell your neighbor, God may not move it, but every step you take, God is moving inside of you. Come here. Come here, David. David says, that's why I penned Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. He says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I feel better right here. I feel no evil. Why? Because he's walking with me, and I'm not by myself. Thy rod and thy staff, thy comfort me. Then he says, God keeps on moving so good. He said, he makes a table before me in the presence of my enemy. And that's what I came to tell you this morning, Greater Thankful. Don't you move without God. Yes, you got trials. Yes, you got troubles. Yes, you got sickness in your body. Yes, you got family problems. But don't you move without God. So we need to have, oh God, an earnest attachment. Can I give you something else, church? If you're going to keep trusting, not only must you have an endeavor to keep on pushing, you got to have an earnest attachment. But here's the second thing you got to have. You need to be expressive concerning your needs. You need to be expressive in concerning your needs. There is within this text a detailed prayer housed within the lyrics, Brother Goodbread. The urgency of need is felt within the request of the psalmist. Listen to what he says. Never let me be put to shame. There's no time to waste on an opinion of the lyrics. He says, I need divine engagement. There's a request for God's involvement. The psalmist is now speaking metaphorically about God. He says, Lord, lend your ear to me. He gives God human characteristics when we are in need and life is seemingly falling apart. You just need someone that'll listen to you. It is that theologian Paul Tillich who says that the first duty of love is to listen. God's willingness to listen is proof, watch this, that he loves us. Okay. Come here. May I submit to you, church, have you ever been in a bad spot where you were trying to express your need and a person that you were trying to confide in didn't have time to listen? Or they were hearing you, but they weren't listening to you? Here in the psalm, it says we serve a God. Don't miss this. He says, I'm willing to listen, and don't miss this. Oftentimes, people's Unwillingness to listen is their silent way of saying, I'm unwilling to help. But God's willingness to listen is a precursor that God is saying, because I listen to you, it shows that I have a willingness and an ability to act on your behalf. Okay, come a little closer. Let me help you here. I know some people that's willing but ain't able. But I got some friends that's able but ain't willing. But the good news is I serve a God that's willing and able, and he's able and willing. I help y'all. I'm trying to, well, y'all alive in here. He says, God, I need you to deliver. And he says, God, I need you to be a rock and a refuge. But there's a nuance in the request, rock and refuge. He says, I need you to be a big enough rock that I can hide in. But I need you to be God enough. I need you to be large enough where I can take a respite or a break from the storms of life. He says, I need a moment when I can stop and reflect. But I can't stop and reflect anywhere. I need to be able to hide in you. Beloved, can I suggest to you that don't we all need moments, oh God, of reflection? Because once there are moments of reflection, when you read verse number 3, you can come out with a stronger resolve. Listen to verse 3. For you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you lead me and guide me. The psalmist says, Lord, if you've given me a hiding place, I can come out knowing that you are my security and my stability. Has anyone ever had some tight moments in your life where you've been blessed to come out on the other side and you say, God, I know it was you? They used to sing a song down where I'm from. It was nobody but you, Lord. Nobody but you. When I was in trouble, it was nobody but you. But wait, y'all not understanding me this morning. I'm not talking about just any kind of situation, but I'm talking about an encounter where you should have lost your life. Where you should have lost everything, lost your dignity, lost your money, lost your reputation. And you said, God, if you don't do it, it won't be done. And this is what the psalmist says. God, I know it was you. But what I like about it, he says, God, it's you. Watch this. I give you the credit because of your name's sake. So it begs you to ask the question. You have to ask the question. God, why do you deliver me? Is it because of me? God says, no, I love you, but you're not that important. Come a little closer. Let me put a coin in the meter right here, because there's a lot of church folk who think they're more important than what they really are. Sometimes we have an over-exaggerated view of ourselves, and we think God is always working on our behalf because God needs us. Newsflash, God don't need none of us. I heard people say, I told God if he do this, I'll do that. God don't really need us. Because if you don't, God can find somebody else, and God can raise somebody else to do what you say you won't do, and then God has a humor. He'll make you do the same thing you said you wouldn't do. Y'all don't believe me? Okay, try dying. They'll have a funeral. They'll roll you in. We'll go to the cemetery. We'll go to the life center or your cousin them house, eat fried chicken, potato salad, green beans, roll, sweet tea and lemonade, and the church and your family will move on. Your cousins will pour out a drink for you and say, we sure do miss you. But the question that I ask God is, God, why do you intervene? Why do you always involve yourself in our lives? God says, I do it because when you're my child, my name is on the line. Wait, have you ever asked God, why does God lead, love, and provide for you in the manner that he does? Listen, God says, I do it because my name is on the line. You thought the promotion was because of you. He said, but my name was on you, bro. You thought you got the raise because of you, sis. He said, no, my name was on you. You thought you got into certain circles because of you. God says, I let you get in the circle because my name is on you. You think your family is living high because of you. God says, I allowed you to have everything that you have in spite of you because you ain't always been that good. Some days you got a nasty attitude. Some days you're hard to get along, but in spite of you, I bless you anyway. Because God says, I want to use you to be a walking billboard so that everybody can see my power and evidence and my faithfulness. Tell somebody, I'm just thankful that God did it in spite of me. Because let me tell you, there's some places that my name couldn't get me into. There are some places and situations that my name couldn't get me out of. But I know a name. This name, Jesus, that says that every knee shall bow. His name, Jehovah Nissi. He's my banner. Jehovah Shalom. He's my peace. Jehovah Jireh. He's my provider. Touch yourself and say, I got a name. His name is Jesus. There's something about that name. Let heaven and earth proclaim. Kings and kingdoms may pass away, but there's something about their name. Here's my favorite hymn. There is a name that I love to hear. It sounds like music in my ear. The sweetest name on earth. Help me say, oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me. When you're sick, I dare you call on his name. When you're in trouble, I dare you to call on his name. When you're in delusion, I dare you to call on his name. Because when you call on his name, something happens. When you don't have nobody else, call on his name. I ought to have a witness in Third Thankful this morning. The only reason you here in these pews this morning is because you called on his name. But even before you learn to call on his name, some mama, some grandmama, some granddaddy, somebody called on your name when you was in the club. Somebody called. I'm done. I'm running out of time. I didn't mean to hold you this long. I got to get down the road to Troy, Alabama to begin revival tonight. But I got to tell you one more thing. Because when you keep reading the song, it says, into thy hand I commit my spirit. Don't that sound familiar? This was the prayer that Jesus prayed when he was on the cross. I want to tell you that you can't put your spirit in just anybody's hands. It's my prayer this morning. Lord, don't leave me in the hands of man, but keep me in your hands. Have I got a witness? So the question is, why should we put our life in God's hands? Have I got a witness? Because God's hands are responsible hands. Why don't you look at somebody and say, God's hands are responsible hands. It was God's hand that sealed Noah in a ship. It was God's hand that created a sidewalk through the middle of a Red Sea. It was God's hand that created a crimson cord for the spies. It was God's hand that caused the children of Israel to navigate the chaotic terrain of the wilderness. It was God's hand that allowed them, that gave them a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Look at somebody and say, those are some mighty good hands. And so why should you put your hand in God's hands, your life in God's hand? Because God's hands are responsible. But here's the last reason, because God is on your side. I'm out of here, but I put my life in God's hand. Not only because his hands are responsible, but because God is on my side. Come here, Paul. Paul said, I know because of the providence. He asks us a question. What shall separate me from the love of God? Shall distress, tribulation, sword, or spirit? And then Paul steps back and answer his own questions and says, nothing shall separate me from the love of God. And then he gets over the Romans chapter 8 and he got a little happy and say, we know that all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord. Help me tell somebody, you can trust God's hands. I know it's hard. I know you don't know what to do, but I come to tell you, greater thankful. Put your situation in God's mixing bowl. I know you've been down. Put it in the bowl. Depressed. Put it in the bowl. Sick. Put it in the bowl. Frustrated. Put it in the bowl. Lack of money. Put it in the bowl. And watch God mix it all together. And when he mix it all together, he'll start stirring it up, and you will be able to turn around and say, I got a testimony that I've seen the lightning flash. I heard the thunder roar. I felt sin breakers dashing to conquer my soul. But look at me now, because I trusted God, and I'm able to tell somebody that he's a way out of no way. He's a heavy load bearer. Is there anybody here? Do I got anybody that you seen God heal you? You seen God open doors. You seen God make ways. You ought to stand to your feet and wave your hands like you just don't care and tell somebody, trust God. The old church says, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me that I am his own. Is there anybody here that can say glory, glory, hallelujah? Since I laid my burdens down, I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burden down, do me one more favor. Just fist bump somebody and say, neighbor, you were looking at a real life survivor. I should have been dead, sleeping in my grave, but here I am. Here I am on the second Sunday,